we seem to be rolling. Yep, we are live. Once again, guys, you are listening to the Solvable Mysteries Podcast, episode number 38. My name is Juras. I'm joined by my co-host, Glenn Highcove. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing okay. I think about as well as things could be.
Right. Same here. I'm doing pretty well, and I'm actually really excited for today's case. We actually have decided to split this case into two episodes, I guess, just because there's an overflow of information here, and even in those two episodes, we won't be covering everything. But I feel like we have enough details for two episodes, and this case was really interesting to me, so that's why we decided to do part 1 and then part 2. So both of these parts will be coming out this week. So we are obviously, I don't know why I always say obviously, people don't know what we prepared to talk about. We are going to be talking about the disappearance of Maura Murray. So as always, I ask you, have you heard anything about this case? Like, what is your general perception of this case, like, before we actually started investigating it? Like, personally, I'm just gonna say real quick, I have not heard about this case before. I just saw it mentioned somewhere on the internet, and then I read into it, and that's how I found out about the situation.
Yeah, same thing for me. I just totally blew past it. I wonder, gosh, when we dug into it, it does seem like it's gotten a lot of people's attention, but if I were to just have a knee-jerk reaction, I would have said, oh, maybe it was more of an East Coast thing, and didn't make it to the West Coast. But yeah, for whatever reason, like, it never, not like some of the other stuff we talked about, like, the California cases, of course.
Yeah. Or the more paranormal cases. But the funny thing here is, well, I'm not sure if it's that funny, but this case actually has a cult following, almost, you could say, right? There's a whole bunch of podcasts. I think I know at least 2, or maybe like even 3. I can't remember if those are like different podcasts in my head that are solely centered around this case. So one of the podcasts is Missing Maura Murray. So, they have shows about this case all the time, and they are like, I haven't really listened to much of their stuff, but I assume they cover every single theory that they come about, and, we obviously won't be giving that in-depth look into this case, just, I guess, our usual talking about the case, and then probably trying to come with some sort of a conclusion, what was what actually happened in the case, most likely, at least what we believe. So if a lot of like fans of those other podcasts come onto this show, I'm sure they will disagree with us. So this is just a little piece of information before we go into this, that there are other people who did more in-depth analysis of this case, and we're just gonna be looking at the most important facts and giving our own conclusions. So without any further ado, let's get into the case. So before we move into all the interesting details, let's just give a quick introduction into what actually went down. So I have this little thing here that I want to read. So Maura Murray, that you can see on the image right now, if you are obviously watching this on YouTube, was an American woman who disappeared on the evening of February 9th in 2004 after a car crash on Route 112 near Woodsville, New Hampshire, a village in Haverhill. Her whereabouts remain unknown. She was also 21 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was a nursing student. She was completing her junior year at the University of Massachusetts. I pronounced that so badly. Amherst, at the time of her disappearance. So wait, is this the University of Massachusetts, or is this Amherst, or is this like some other university? Because I've heard about the Massachusetts university. Like, I can't pronounce this name for some reason.
It's a good question. I'm not sure if it's like a private or public school. If it's if there's more than one Amherst.
Right.
I've heard just kind of, like I said, it's probably a little bit of my own ignorance of their, the schools out there in that part of the country. But I'm checking it out right here. It says here, UMass Amherst College. It says it's a private college.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It says, I think it's some little towns. I'm assuming it's only just the one college. So yeah, it looks like it's a private college out there. Yeah.
Right. So I also have this in the script that she has, like the first thing that we, I guess, can talk about. She was born in 1982 in Hanson, so in the same state of, Massachusetts. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Finally,
no, that's good.
I'm gonna be pronouncing Massachusetts like in this speed. Okay, so she was born in 82, so she lived in the same state, so she's the first thing that we could, I guess, talk about is that she is from this state, that she went missing. And I've mentioned that she went missing from a crash site, so let me just quickly bring up her whereabouts. Okay, so the crash site's whereabouts, I wish I could bring her whereabouts, but obviously I don't have that information right now. This is the crash site pretty much. It happened right around this corner, so not really sure in which direction the car was heading, but it happened somewhere around here, right? And I'm looking at it, it definitely looks like, the northern east coast of America. It's definitely, the scenery correlates to what my expectations would be, and it happened pretty near the border of Canada, so right there's a theory maybe she was heading to Canada, but this is like just a preliminary thing that I just noticed.
Yeah, actually, I gotta correct myself real quick. Looks like there is actually a public research university. So UMass Amherst is actually, it's confusing because looks like there might be a couple of different colleges after all, even that little town.
Right.
But
because,
yeah, it looks like it is. Yeah.
Because they all want the money, like they pretend to be the other university, like I see what I see what they're doing.
It's a big plot. Yeah,
right.
So I guess that's why that's the UMass part. It is actually part of the University of Massachusetts.
Right.
But yeah.
Anyways, she was an accomplished high school athlete as well. So what was she doing? From my end of the research, she did track and field, right? And some other thing, like things that revolved around running. Am I correct?
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's some pictures of her doing what looks like some pretty vigorous running. I'm not clear. I'll have to look up real quick what kind of track and field she did, because I'm curious if it's. I'm gonna just take a stab based on kind of the other stuff that went on.
Right.
That it was probably something more around stamina. So like, you know what I mean? How like there's different kinds of track and field events. There's some events that are like short sprints, and there's some that are like more intermediate or longer running.
Right. I have a few pictures of her. So it seems that she was doing like those longer distance running. Like not like speed running, but like more of a how should I put it, endurance ones. So she was an accomplished student. Also, another interesting fact is that I don't know if this is how she got into this university, but I'm pretty sure she got into this university because of her athletic capabilities, right?
Yeah.
So this definitely points us to one thing immediately, that she was an athletic person. So it's not like what I'm trying to say here is that she would not succumb to the I guess nature, or how do you say that, to the elements, right? Succumb to the elements that easily. Like that's just a notion that I have, that she was an athletic person that could pretty much, like, I don't know, take care of herself probably a little bit better than the average person. I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, so someone in good physical shape, and especially having done it out there, it's like Massachusetts is like a pretty intense weather state. I mean, it's probably a lot more like your weather than my weather. That's for sure.
Right. So she, at some point she went to West Point, but had to leave due to stealing. So I don't know, man, you want to take it from here? Because I feel like you are more knowledgeable about West Point and the whole situation in general.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because so West Point, you and I were talking about this beforehand. West Point is one of the oldest universities in the United States, and it's also specifically the university for the United States Army. So if you were gonna want to become like a kind of make it to the top tier of the U.S. military, especially in the Army, and eventually make it to like Joint Chiefs of Staff or even just general or colonel or some kind of higher officer rank, higher level of management. It's a school that has enormous amounts of prestige. In fact, to even get into West Point, I believe your congressperson or your senator has to sponsor you. So yeah, you actually you have to like I remember when I went to go get so I was in Boy Scouts, and I made Eagle Scout, which is like the highest level of Boy Scouts, the highest rank. And I remember when I went to like a special dinner they had for like all of us in like my little district that had made Eagle the previous year. They had like a little celebration dinner. I remember there was like one or two guys who like were there in their West Point uniforms, and it's like, yeah, I mean, like, so like even us Eagle Scouts who were so impressed with ourselves for being the 1 or 2% of Boy Scouts that make it all the way, that was like the level of person that it would take to that's the kind of driven person it would be to go and get their congressperson to sponsor them for that. And it's like a really prestigious thing. I say it's like the Harvard of military schools. It's enormously prestigious, and in fact they didn't even admit women until I want to say the mid 1990s, the early to mid 1990s. So when she went,
wait, that's like recent,
really recent. So when she went, that was still within like probably the first 10 years or so of them admitting women, and it's just it was one of those schools that for the longest time didn't admit women. I mean, part of it's because the military,
I guess,
didn't allow women in combat situations for the longest time. Now they do. Now they've changed their rules about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's extremely prestigious. I think on one hand, maybe this points to why a lot of the research, the people that talk about her are very enthusiastic about her and have many good things to say about her, about Maura, because it seems like she's a very driven person. Apparently she was some kind of star athlete in her track team. I wish we could find out a little more of what was so star about her, what was so spectacular.
Maybe I can do that, yeah. But we have obviously we have something mentioned in the script that's I guess doesn't really correlate with that sort of notion of thinking about Maura, that she was a completely perfect person,
Yeah. So then the other thing to call out about West Point is, and I think this was one of the reasons why it is like the kind of the officer college for the U.S. military, is there's one of the big things that they push in West Point, like the central tenets, is honor. So they have an honor program. You're really judged on the content of your character. You're really judged in terms of upholding the reputation of the university, but also your own reputation. So not lying, not cheating, not stealing.
Yeah.
Case in point, before we talk about what happened to Maura, I know of a famous case. It was like a psychological study where, when someone gets rejected by their peers, it's not unusual for them to like lose weight and like not eat very well. So case in point, like there was somebody who had been accused of cheating, and he denied it, and they couldn't prove it. But then he was ostracized by his peers for the rest of the year. He had to eat by himself. Nobody wanted to eat with him. So
a really quick, I guess I just want to quickly jump to one thing before you move along. She was a distance runner. I found this Reddit post. Like,
Oh, good.
as I've said, people that are looking into this case are looking at absolutely everything. Like,
Right.
one thing I mentioned prior to recording this episode, I really did not get why she became a cult figure like this, but she apparently has, and now any sort of information we want, we could pretty much find it on the internet about her. So I guess this is why we're doing 2 episodes on this case. But yeah, so they even have her they even have her like results, as you can see, like, okay, page not found, but back 4 years ago maybe the information was still there. So she ran 10k at 6 minutes and 37 second pace, which is, you know, the guy who wrote this left a wow by this result. So I'm assuming this is a really good pace. And then 2 miles at 5:45 and then 5k at 6:40. So you know, I'm not a runner. These numbers really don't say anything to me, but I guess these are really good numbers, you know.
Yeah. So I guess that shows you what kind of shape she was in, and to be able to do that.
Right.
And like I said, Massachusetts weather, like that whole state is known for just having really brutal winters. And I imagine some amount of her training must have been in that. So yeah, I mean, so on one hand, she seems like exactly the kind of tough, driven, achievement-oriented person that they would want at a very prestigious, you know, college like West Point. I mean, I'm assuming that because she went there, that at some point she was thinking about going into the military, because that's usually what happens is you go into West Point, and then you actually get to enter the Army after you graduate as an officer.
Because like what else are you gonna do after West Point?
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, that's the whole point. It's like, why would you go to a military school unless you were going to go into the military? And then what's nice is, because you've had that level of training already, you get to be an officer like right away. You don't have to do, you know, like so you're
just for reference reasons, how long would it take for a regular, I guess, private to become an officer? Like, just how much time would it take for them to actually achieve that?
Well, that's the thing. A lot usually outside of wartime has weird things that happen, but for a private, for like someone that basically had no college education,
yes,
to become an officer, it often doesn't happen at all. The best you can get is maybe what's called a non-commissioned officer, which is still a very respected position. And there's actually a point where a non-commissioned officer is like somebody who's been in the Army 10, 15, 20 years, and from a like moral authority standpoint, a commissioned officer is supposed to listen to him. So what could happen is somebody could graduate from West Point and become like a second lieutenant and technically be the boss of like a 15 or 20 year veteran,
Jesus,
non-commissioned officer.
That's crazy. Yeah.
But that non-commissioned officer, he's sort of like, you know, maybe the foreman on like the factory floor, while like this commissioned officer is like the upper management. But because this person has so much experience, you're supposed to listen to him. So a lot of times, he or she, the non-commissioned officer, kind of really is the boss, or at least gets to tell the boss what to do.
Right, but not like formally on paper, but you know.
Exactly.
I get
exactly.
I get
perfect.
it.
Yeah. That's the perfect thing. So yeah, on paper, the second lieutenant is still in charge, but
right, but that's crazy, you know. Yeah, but like, let's continue on with more.
So she was in that program, and it says here she was going to be a chemical engineer, and I think this is when. There was some other stuff that comes up that we'll talk about as well. It wasn't the first time, I guess, that anything had gone a little weird in her life, but I think this is the first time where she experienced, let's call it a career failure.
Okay.
Because it wasn't. I mean, it turns out there was actually some academic failure as well, but the career failure part was in terms of, this is a school that's very honor based, and apparently she was on some kind of outing. So she was caught stealing makeup at Fort Knox. So I guess they were on a trip somewhere. They were on a trip to Fort Knox, which is that's actually where we keep our gold reserve.
Right. Everyone knows about that place. Just another one amazing landscape of the United States.
Just another one of our weird weird spots. So she was caught stealing something like less than $5 worth of makeup at the commissary, and it's just bewildering why someone would do that, especially since I don't know. There's a lot of question marks about that, but
Yeah, no doubt.
They had enough evidence. It says here they had enough evidence against her to take it to trial before the cadet advisory board. And I think they kind of like try their own internally.
Oh wow.
But they had enough evidence to show that she was guilty of theft, and she pled guilty. And then they basically recommended that she be expelled. And
yikes.
yeah, she just, instead of that happening, she withdrew. And this is the interesting part is, it was kind of frustrating to me because I'd read this in the Wikipedia entry before I started doing my other research, and then the pieces that I saw from all these different people talking about this, I want to say none of them mentioned it, and I was like, what is going? Why is it so one-sided? So you know what I mean? You had all these
that she stole some makeup, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was like, they're just like, oh, she suddenly transferred, and it's like, it's a big deal. It's like going, like
it's
I said,
like,
it's
maybe she would have been in West Point and she would have graduated if that incident would have not occurred.
Yeah. I mean, and the difference is so strong. This isn't to say bad things about Amherst, but to go from chemical engineering program at West Point to a nursing program at Amherst.
I mean, we can all understand,
Yeah.
I mean,
a nurse is not the same thing as an engineer.
You're definitely, no offense to nurses, especially during these times. And I feel like during these times, nurses are a lot more important than engineers, but like, it's weird how no one really mentioned that, because, like my first introduction to this case, I was watching this documentary, I think it was like ID from Discovery, something like that, right? So they completely disregard all of this information. They don't mention it once. It's all about how she just went missing, and it's a complete mystery, and they don't have any sort of details. They're like, they made it out to be like, I'm not sure if it was Discovery ID. I feel like it was Discovery ID. They made it out to seem like there was nothing to go from. There was no information to go from in this case. Like there was nothing. Like, oh my god, it's like she vanished without no indications. She had like a perfect life and everything was going great. When you do just a little bit of digging, you find out that, clearly that's not the case. Clearly there has been some issues in her life,
Yeah, it feels like it was really missing that context. I'll go even a little further, because this is, I think, one of the other sources I found was saying, like I said, I'll have to give it a little bit of an asterisk here,
right? Because
it was based on some webpage somewhere. Like I said, there's a cult following, but this person insinuated that she had actually signed documentation that kept both medical information, disciplinary news from her parents. So she was I don't know if the word is deceptive or she essentially kind of engaged in a little cover up. So she hid things, I guess it would say. And then she had gone, okay, here's the other thing for later on, is she had gone through, the cadet basic training and was trained in, survival, swimming, self-defense, and combat. So, I mean, no surprise. I mean, so that's the other thing about West Point is, it's like doing boot camp for 4 years, right? You're going to be physically fit to do that. It's all about, you're running laps and miles and doing very hard physical things. So that's one of the reasons why you get to be an officer when you come out of that, and why it's so respected. And it says she was pulled out of class 7 times in 2001 to appear before the honor board. So I'm assuming at least some of that was related to the thing we talked about already. So maybe that it's just like an ongoing process. And it says she had generally good marks, but failed statistics and probability at the end of 2001. Now that's something that made a little red flag for me, because I was like, well, just as we get into the rest of this, to me, it makes you think, okay, if you were having academic failure for the first time in your life, would that either A, make you act out in some way? So, this is also the age where psychological problems and substance abuse start emerging.
Right.
So is that where you either self-sabotage or have some kind of, the pressure starts to get to you that makes some kind of mental illness emerge? The other thing they mentioned is she may be semi-fluent in German, so I don't know if that's just because she took German language class.
Right. But
the other thing that was interesting in the research was, like in between all these people saying all these nice things about her, there was also, they were like, well, once in a while she would suddenly disappear, like that time in high school when she just decided to
go to Boston.
Disappear. Yeah,
Right.
just disappear for the entire day and skip school, and then showed up at the end of the day and didn't tell us where she went, or it was, okay, well, that's a little bit interesting. That's kind of like she just sort of, she seemed like sometimes she wanted to do things and didn't care about other people, and it was all about her. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's like we could definitely go and now I guess definitely say that some people covered it in a weird way, where they sort of just assumed that she had no issues and this was a complete like a crazy event that happened to a person who was completely normal, who was living that completely perfect normal life, but we actually will find out that there were a lot of details. So I guess at this point, we can now move into the actual disappearance, right? So
one more thing.
Sure.
Yeah, so right before that, right before we get to kind of the final, let's say, days or weeks, the one other interesting thing that happened was, okay, so she went, she transferred to Amherst, and she's doing the nursing program. And before even kind of this other series of events, I thought that this was disturbing too. So she had a credit card fraud.
Yes.
Yeah,
I almost forgot. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was weird because it was like, once again, she seems to have this kind of blessed life where everybody kind of gives her the benefit, except for West Point. Everybody gives her the
except for that.
Yeah, except for that they don't put up with anything. Everybody, like she did something that I think, let's be fair. If it had been somebody from a different circumstance or socioeconomic level of society, she may not have been treated as leniently as she was. So she had been using a stolen credit card to order food out.
Oh yeah.
And the punishment was, and it seems like the court basically said, yeah, you know what, we'll give you 3 months to be a normal human being, and at the end of that 3 months, if you don't get in any more trouble, we'll just make it go away.
Right.
And it's wow, not everyone gets that, privilege.
I mean, that's definitely lenient,
Yeah.
Wait, was it like from, I haven't really delved really deep into that, situation with the credit card. I feel like she was ordering. Wait, did they know what she actually ordered? Because I feel like there's one piece of, I guess, like source of information that I've looked into. They didn't really know what she ordered, like pizzas or something, like.
It's a good question, because later on, alcohol seems to, or at least the implication,
it seems to play a part, right?
Yeah. And I'm trying to think if she was even really old enough to
have a credit card,
right? Yeah, or order alcohol. We talked about this, how restrictive the United States is with alcohol.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah. But I mean, yeah, it's interesting because it's like, it doesn't really seem like it's a person that had the financial need. Other than she didn't seem to have a lot of personal spending cash, but it's a very stupid, short-sighted thing to do, to use to do something like that. I mean, the comparison I can think of is, a long time ago, I had a high school acquaintance who, like, no joke, like the second year of college, we weren't at the same college at the time, but he was at a bank job, and a coworker convinced him to pass a fake bill,
Oh, man.
which is the stupidest thing you can ever. I mean, as far as like what seems like a minor crime, it's not a minor crime. Here, you get when you do that, you get the Treasury Department, so the Secret Service gets involved. And this guy passed like a fake $100 bill, and within a week had like unmarked police cars following him around, and pretty soon was busy getting interviewed. Whoa. And ended up having a plea bargain, and he had like a permanent black mark on his record.
Jeez,
right? So this credit card, card thing had like the same potential.
America doesn't play when it comes to money, like you guys really don't play. So
yeah,
this definitely had that same type of a potential, especially somewhere in the US. But I guess she got that, away with that fairly unscathed. Now you mentioned the line of events that went down. So there are some really interesting things that happened right before she went missing. So I guess let's not jump into the day that she went missing. Let's jump into, what was it, 2 days prior to when she went missing, right? There was an accident. So in terms of a car, right? You want to?
Actually, even earlier than that,
right?
And I think I only mention this because maybe it indicates that there was a family history of potentially like alcohol.
Okay, sure. Yeah, let's cover that. And,
so
perfect.
So one thing that was interesting was for all this weirdness with like honesty and stealing, for some reason she had a campus security job. So once again, it's like she seems really to be able to kind of get trusted or by anybody. So
I just want to interrupt for one moment. Maybe she, I don't know what the saying goes, like there's more beneath the eyes or something, where it's like maybe she was, not the most perfect person in the world in terms of, like, I'm sure she was a good person, but like maybe not like super uptight, as everyone made it out her to seem like she was, like this perfect person. Maybe she was a little bit like I'm definitely not perfect or anything like that. I'm sure I did a lot worse stuff than Maura did, but just in general, I'm not being like reported by anyone to be like this perfect person, so yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess she has what they call like almost like a halo around her. I mean, in terms of how people talked about her,
right?
At least after the fact. I mean, she seemed like she was very much a liked person, and so she got this. She was on duty at her campus security job, and she gets a phone call with her older sister Kathleen, and apparently it was a pretty emotional call. What was going on. So I mean, it's kind of back and forth about what happened, but one of the allegations was that the call was that her sister had just gotten out of like a rehabilitation clinic, which I assume was drugs and alcohol, and she says, and on the way home, the fiance of her sister took the sister to a liquor store, which caused an emotional breakdown, and I guess talking about it upset her. Well, if that's true, what a scumbag move. I mean, what are you doing? Like, why would you take someone who just went through all that and probably some kind of personal expense? I mean, we don't really know the details about whether that rehab was court ordered or privately paid for or whatever, but it is interesting because I will say, so this is me having like Irish background, and this isn't to pick on the Irish, it's to pick on lots of people all around the world.
I mean, I'm from Eastern Europe, I'm no stranger to these things.
I mean, alcohol, alcohol is an addictive substance.
No doubt.
And there's I know, especially Irish Americans. I mean, there's some. Actually, one of Joe Rogan's. Actually, I think two different comedians that are friends with Rogan. Both, I think, Fitzsimmons and the other guy. I can't remember his name.
Bill Burr, maybe, no.
No. Crap. It's the guy that used to work on. on a big TV show.
Okay.
Anyways, both
Yeah.
of them don't drink because there's alcoholism. They're Irish Americans,
Mhm.
and there's massive like it's like instantly problematic problems with
Yeah, of
alcohol,
course.
and that's just a fact for some people. But Irish Americans especially have had a
Wait,
lot of challenges
was
with this.
Murray Irish by any?
Yeah. I mean that name is 100% Irish, and
Okay.
even her first name seems Irish. So yeah, I mean
Right,
Murray
right.
is traditionally an Irish name, and
Okay.
I can only speculate that there might be some. It's just speculation, just my opinion. That there may have been the beginnings of an alcohol problem for her, especially if she already had other family members that were struggling with it, and that's in a state that is heavily populated by, amongst other folks, Irish Americans who
Yeah.
have alcohol issues. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. That's a good. That's definitely a really good detail. By the
So
way,
that might really upset her.
right. So before I guess we move into the line of events that
Yeah.
initially, concluded in her going missing, is there any more of these like interesting details that we could like still mention before we go into this? Because I just want to quickly mention that this detail that you just said with her potentially having drinking issues, or at least her family members having drinking issues, it definitely like links up with what we'll come to find out what
With the
happened
other stuff that happened.
in both of the crashes, to be honest, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a perfect segue. So yeah, on the what is it? Is it Sunday the 8th? She goes out car shopping with her dad, and so I guess they're gonna go buy her a car. And
She already had one, but her current car was really like beat down and old from
Okay.
from what I've gathered. So she already had a car because for her medical studies she had to do like I think medical work somewhere, which would make sense, but I could be a little bit off here, so don't quote me on this. So she had to take like I think an hour or like 2 hour drive every day for the medical work, so a car was a must for her, and her current car was like beat up and raggedy, but so maybe that's why it crashed for the second time. But like yeah, so her and her father actually went to go car shopping.
Yeah, and then she takes his car. Well, that doesn't take it. I mean, he lends her his car.
Right.
And she actually drops him off, and then she goes back to campus to attend a party. And then, as I understand it, when she's driving back, where was she going? She was trying to. Yeah.
This is an interesting situation because, like, I'm not sure if you covered this detail, and maybe we'll go more in depth in part 2, because I'm sure someone in the audience right now probably knows all about what I'm going to say here. There was a situation, or at least there are some theories, that she was actually going not by herself, but maybe with some other guy, while she already had her long distance boyfriend back somewhere, stationed in Oklahoma or something. So maybe there's a theory. I'm not saying that happened. That may not even happen, but there's a theory floating around that she was with someone else in that car. Now I could be. Now I'm definitely not this. Saying that that's 100% what happened, but there's something like that there. So maybe when some case gets covered as crazy by the internet investigators than like this one, there's gonna be all sorts of theories. So it's just natural for this theory to be in existence. And another thing is that someone from the party that she attended actually refuses to speak about who she saw, because this was a female. She refuses to pretty much name the people who saw her at that party, like who were in that party. And I think there's this whole situation that they don't want to pretty much say that Maura was maybe chilling with some other dude or something like that. It's just a theory. So it's just a theory.
Yeah, well, that would make sense. I mean, once again, it's just it's interesting about this kind of protective envelope of people around her, and even the media seem complicit in not asking some of the hard questions. So
Exactly.
and I'm actually going to correct myself. The night started actually on Saturday night, so it was Saturday night, and then Sunday morning. It says here when she's on her way back at like 2:30 in the morning, or so it says 3:30 in the morning en route to her father's motel. So I mean, to be fair, Massachusetts, lots of ice, lots of slick, snowy roads. I know Rogan on his show always talks about how scary driving is over there and how much he hated driving there and spinning around in ice. So you don't have to be drunk to crash on an icy road in Massachusetts. But it was interesting that she crashed and she did a bunch of damage. So I don't know if she was just going hard or it's just a testament to how much the insurance companies want to, or the body shops want to gouge you for repairs. But it says she did $10,000 worth of damage to her father's Toyota Corolla, which just makes me wince. I mean, it sucks. It's a good exactly. car to get all banged up, and an officer responds there, and it doesn't look like there was any. Interestingly, there wasn't any sobriety test conducted, which is kind of strange for somebody coming from a party and that time of night. And like, you know what I'm saying, Ross? Like, I feel like if I were that age and I crashed into something, I know, like when I was in college, I knew somebody in one of my classes who on the freeway, he was drunk and he made a quick turn and he flipped the truck and he lost his license.
Right.
Because right away they were like, yeah, let's just check you out, buddy. Let's breathalyze you. So that's interesting.
Really interesting. Right. So she crashes the car. Her father, from what I've gathered, actually, she was like, okay, so she was allegedly really upset, which is completely normal at this point, that she crashed her father's car and doing $10,000 worth of damages on a Toyota Corolla. $10,000, that could get you a pretty nice car, just like that, So so it's really, really the damages were really good. So I'm assuming at that time the car was really expensive, in 2004. This Toyota Corolla, maybe it was the new model or something. So she's essentially really upset. She somehow speaks to her father. I think her father comes by her dorm room. They speak about it. He tells her that the insurance company has it covered, and that everything's gonna be fine. Like, take a rest or something. At least that's like from the Discovery ID documentary that I've gathered. Maybe they were full of like crap, and maybe it was a situation where the father said, like, was mad at her. So who knows if the father was mad at her, or if he was like, like, it's okay, everything's gonna be fine. But like the Discovery ID guys, they pretty much portrayed it as, that the father said that everything's gonna be fine. Well, obviously the father was on that show, so he probably told them that, so maybe if he was involved somehow, he would obviously lie to what happened. So we don't know how the father reacted. I feel in this case we need to question everything, but the one thing that we can know for certain, that there was this chat right before he went back somehow to like wherever he was staying, and then Maura went to her dorm room. And then allegedly her father called her and said, like, you need to get those papers tomorrow from the police to fill in like the crash form, something like that, like paperwork for insurance and stuff. And he said, like, have those ready. Can't really remember, like something around like 10 in the morning, something like that. So have those ready for me and we'll figure this out. So this is what the father allegedly stated that was happening. So this is the last time he spoke to his daughter. And I guess we can take it from here, from the actual event, the second car crash.
I mean, so that's So within it, I mean, it sucks. I guess this has happened to people where sometimes they have two quick accidents in a row, but it seems like she already had maybe, dodged a bullet not getting tested for DUI. Certainly just dodged a bullet
On her
and being
first crash, right?
in her first crash and in being unharmed, of course, in an auto accident that seems to have caused so much damage. So then there's a bunch of weird stuff that goes on here. So on the afternoon of Monday, she emailed her professors and work supervisor, writing that she was taking a week off due to a death in the family. And this later turned out to be not true. There was no death in the family. And also, as they found out afterwards, she had packed up a lot of her boxes like she was going to move. Like she had taken photos off the wall and things off the wall, and she printed up some email where she was talking. I don't know if the email was to her boyfriend or just back and forth with the boyfriend where they were having her boyfriend Billy, who she was having.
Right.
So I guess there's just a sort of vague allusion to some kind of relationship issues, which is normal, but. There's a couple different things. So that happened, and then later on in the day...
A real quick interruption here. Regarding the email that she had printed out, from what I've gathered, it was like regarding the time when Billy Rauch, the boyfriend of Maura, actually cheated on her. Okay. So it was regarding that. So packing your stuff like that and printing out like that email, I mean, these are like red flags, like immediately that this person was not in a 100% healthy state of mind at that point, like this is like jumping out like immediately to me,
this is where I think it really colors the perception of the rest of what happens here, and even for a lot of the theories, because it's like, well, this person was doing a lot of suspicious stuff. So the other thing was she goes to an ATM and she withdraws. This is actually this is the last image we have of her. There's an ATM. There's a video from the ATM. They were able to get footage later of her, because like ATMs take your photo or your video now, so that if someone steals your card,
I have it by the way. Let me just bring it up for us real quick. I know what this footage is. This is like a stills, I guess there is a footage.
Oh yeah,
but
there
we
we
only
go.
have
So that was
stills. Yeah.
The last photos of her, and I don't know, it doesn't look super happy there, but maybe nobody is really happy at the ATM.
I mean, maybe some people are,
Yeah.
Maybe we are not lucky enough to be those people.
But she essentially, she didn't have that much money in her account. So
it was like 240 or something. 280.
Yeah, it was like 240, 280, something like that, where it's like, but apparently that was almost the entire contents of the account.
But like from what I've gathered also, there's so many details, so I just want to like make sure I also put my input as well. So what I've gathered was that she had multiple bank accounts, and this was only the limit for that particular bank account, So I think she had more than one bank account. Once again, I could be wrong, but just to keep the conversation flowing, just want to quickly drop that in,
No, I didn't know that. Okay, so that's good to know. And then she went to a liquor store by herself.
Right.
Once again. So there's none of these accounts do we see anybody with her. So that's important for later on. But she goes and she buys like a significant amount of liquor. Like it doesn't seem like, so it's either enough liquor for like a person that was gonna make big drinks with a couple of friends, or maybe for one hardcore alcoholic.
Right.
So it was,
Once again, a little bit of input here. The amount, like the liquor that she bought, was like particular liquor things that you could make into a White Russian. So she wasn't like buying those things to like like drink like them separately, so maybe she was buying that to have like a whole bunch of White Russians. Maybe she really liked that, and maybe she was I mean, it's definitely, I would say, a little bit too much for one person. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, especially for just a smaller size person. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a little bit odd. So that once again, you could interpret it a couple different ways, but either way, it was strange, especially for someone who just had an emotional phone call. It says it was $40 with alcoholic beverages. So
Yes.
Bailey's Irish Cream, Kahlua vodka, and a box of I don't know where the Franzia wine comes in. That's a little bit.
I mean, that's
I don't
just
know.
wine, I guess. Wine is like,
Yeah,
you have to
I
have
don't
some
know.
wine on the side. I don't know.
It's a lot of drinking. So,
Right.
and then she also picked up the accident report forms from the Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles. So they say around between 4 and 5, she left Amherst, and she called to check her voicemail at 4:37, and that's the last recorded use of her cell phone. The interesting thing is I haven't found anything yet. Maybe we cover this in part 2, or maybe we find out from a listener. I don't understand why they couldn't track like pings to her cell phone. You know what I mean? Like usually that's what they do. They're usually when someone like especially these days when they're trying to triangulate either a victim or a suspect. Like they just say, well, when did your phone is constantly checking in with mobile cell towers to see if you got voicemails, see if anyone's calling you,
Oh,
etc.
wait. They do you know that there was like no like phone
No
connection,
coverage, right?
no phone
Yeah,
coverage? Yeah, right. So
yeah. So
maybe that's the
that
case. Could
but
that
then
not be the case?
even afterwards, I guess when she left the area,
Right.
I don't know if they're assuming she shut down her phone or if someone else. It's a little bit maybe it's just the whole area just doesn't have any coverage at all, which I guess could
Exactly.
be very, especially back then.
I mean,
So
a real
yeah,
quick interruption once again. What we are seeing is her final route, right? So you could see like some people did a YouTube video, like they filmed this route, and now we can see it's like 3 miles away from the crash site. So as we delve deeper into this case, we can just like have this in the background just to have
yeah.
little notion of what the area looks like.
So yeah, and by the way, that to me in California, that looks like a driving nightmare. I mean, I have no idea what to do in those conditions.
Yeah.
So you can only imagine hitting a patch of ice
Oh my God,
and getting
at
slammed right into the
at night, this
yeah.
is the
Ugh.
easiest thing, like to have an accident. It's
An
easier to have an
accident. Yeah.
accident than to just like drive smoothly through here. So
It,
especially
it,
if you're a little bit intoxicated, it's over.
yeah, I could see why she gets the benefit of the doubt from her friends and family
Oh
that
yeah,
that
oh
nothing, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
I
Because
can
it's like, yeah, I
definitely
mean,
do as well. Yeah,
anybody, I mean, even a race car driver could get in an accident here. So,
yeah,
yeah, just I mean, it happens. So yeah, the and by the way, there's no indication that anyone knew where she was going or
right.
what her destination was or why she was going where she went. So
Exactly. That's also crazy. Like, that after all this time, still no one knows. I mean, her father really indicated hard in that ID, like Discovery ID documentary that she was going to some place where her and her father used to go a lot when she was a kid, because they went there to like trekking trips, stuff like that, just like hiking trips. I mean, so it seemed that her father really insisted that he knew where she was going, you know
right,
so
yeah,
she was potentially going to some area, like, and she was calling up, like, I'm not sure if you were going to mention this, but she made some phone calls that people did manage to track, right? I mean, I'm not sure if you're gonna talk
no,
about.
I wasn't, yeah, I didn't know,
Okay, so there were
yeah,
phone calls that actually tracked to some people that were renting out apartments in like this general area where she was heading to, and
interesting,
she has actually stayed in those apartments, I believe, 1 year prior to her disappearance, with I could be wrong, with her boyfriend, maybe with some other friends. I'm not sure about that detail, but she actually called up people, and potentially inquired about renting those apartments, or like that apartment, because it was pretty cheap and it was a good price and value ratio situation, and
yeah,
she had stayed there. But the lady that answered the phone, that was in charge of renting her the apartments, she actually she couldn't remember her, because you're obviously renting out places all the time and you're talking to different people all the time, and they actually contacted that lady, I believe 3 months after the fact, which was crazy why it took 3 months to get these details and call that person, but it happened like way after the fact. And now this I guess renting person that rents out those apartments, she could no longer recall this phone call with Maura, which is normal, because I definitely can't recall the phone calls I had 2 days ago, so how are you gonna remember who you talked with 3 months ago, right?
No, I mean, I guess it makes sense. It is interesting how that coincides with her packing up, so it makes you wonder what the plan was, or if it's like a red herring, like a false clue that she left intentionally, if she had some other kind of disappearance act. So yeah, it's a little weird. So the weird thing was, after about 7 o'clock, somebody in New Hampshire, near this road you're showing, hears a loud thump, and they look out their window and they see a car out there along the snowbank. And then probably this happens all the time, right? Especially on like, some curves are like,
I'm sure this happens on a regular basis.
Yeah, if it's a curve, it's just especially tenacious. And there's some places where just when it gets icy, it just happens all the time.
Yeah.
So she calls this lady who sees the car, calls the sheriff at 7:27 to report the accident. So nice, responsible resident. And first, it says here, the 911 log says the person claimed to have seen a man smoking a cigarette inside the car, but then later on she revised that statement to say what she really had seen was just a red light glowing inside, which could have been like from a cell phone, which this is before smartphones, so
exactly.
This old school cell phone, folding phone or something.
This is by the way the corner, just a quick interruption once again, this is by the way the corner where she crashed. So I want to give credit to Maura Murray official YouTube channel for providing us with this amazing footage. So thanks a lot, guys, and I hope you don't mind that we use this footage, but yeah, this is where the crash side happened. So as you can see, she was probably yeah, I hope. And she was crashing right around here. So this is a really steep turn. I assume she crashed somewhere around here, right? So this is the crash. That's why they did the slow motion. Like, I mean, I want to backtrack it a little bit. Right, let's imagine the scene is nighttime. I don't see any lamps for light. Maybe this is a lamp for light. I'm not certain. Maybe it is. So it's a dark area. You're heading straight. I mean, I was going to defend Maura for the place to be like pretty hard to make out, but you actually have a pretty like a pretty unique landscape there, like this farmhouse type of a building. So you probably would like have indications that you should be not heading straight. But then again, maybe she saw that, and maybe she was going at fairly high speeds, and maybe she was actually turning, but she didn't expect the turn to be this steep. I could see how someone could not expect this turn to be that steep. This is almost like a 90-degree turn. So you would, if you're going fast, it's over for you. Like, we can also see the signs. So what these signs mean? These signs probably mean that this happens all the time. Like, why would there be signs in the middle of nowhere? Somebody put those signs up for a reason. Maybe they're here after the fact. Maybe they weren't here when Maura crashed. Maybe that's why those signs were put up. But I feel like this is an area where, like, you could definitely be sober and crash as well.
The house is pretty close to the road too. It's kind of scary.
Right. So
if you live there, no wonder they're so paranoid every time they hear a bump. So
Yeah.
And it must have been a little embarrassing for her because like right away, like 2 other neighbors show up as well. So um, someone else said that they saw the car and someone walking around the vehicle, and then they said that person witnessed a third neighbor pull up alongside the vehicle, and that neighbor is a school bus driver who says she was returning home and noticed that the young woman outside of the car, who we assume is Maura, was not bleeding or visibly injured, but just cold and shivering. And this person did the decent thing and was like, hey, I'll call for help. So here's what's interesting is I think
Right.
she says, oh, don't call the police. And
Red
then one
flags.
police
Red
report, yeah,
flags.
red flags. And one police report says pleaded and assured him she'd already called AAA, and AAA says no, nobody called us, and how would you call anyway, because there's no cell reception. And the bus driver
Knew
said, the
this.
bus driver did that mental math too. He's like, yeah, that's not right,
Right.
because there's no cell phone. So he calls the sheriff as well. So the sheriff is getting called by lots of people, and then uh, someone else says that
Yeah.
that they saw. It's kind of weird because you get kind of conflicting statements, but someone else says that around 7:37, when they passed, they saw police SUV face to face with the car, but she said she pulled over briefly and didn't see anyone inside or outside the cars and decided to continue home. But that contradicts the police's official log, which has them showing up 9 minutes later at 7:46. So that's
Right.
strange. I don't really know what to make of that. What I would say real quick though is,
Okay.
gosh, for somebody that was on that don't mess up for 3 months and will not get you in trouble for credit card fraud, and then had just had what maybe was a DUI accident about 36 hours before or less, and now all of a sudden is in another accident with liquor in the car and all this other weird stuff going on. And so that it kind of sounds like she didn't want the police involved.
Exactly, that's definitely what I've gathered. Also, I'm right now trying to find, the crash site photos because I actually forgot to get them beforehand. And what I can see here, obviously, if you're listening to this on YouTube, you could pretty much check out the visuals real quick, and you would see that there is this. Now, okay, I'm not gonna go into like too much details in regarding to. I'm not sure if you can see, Glenn. There is like this, like almost like a smashed front window sort of situation. You see that with like red lines.
Oh, they got like a smashed windscreen. Yeah.
Right. So okay. So real quickly, I'm not sure if this is from the crash scene, but from what I've gathered, this is from the crash scene. Maybe the car was moved a little bit, and that's when they took this picture. But quickly, I just want to note that these red lines, I'm not sure if this is blood, because how this happened is allegedly she was driving. She actually, she from the impact, her head like smashed into the front window, from the inside of the car. So that's
Wow.
what they think what happened. But there are a few issues here. Maura was 5'7", and someone who is 5'7" in this particular vehicle theoretically should not smash into the front window so like high up, you know what
So
I'm saying?
high, yeah.
Right, this is like almost like a basketball player, like someone really tall smashing into this. Maybe Maura Murray would have hit like somewhere around the wheel area, but not necessarily. We don't know what kind of an impact it was. Maybe she was pushed way into the sky, essentially, in an upwards direction. Maybe she was not wearing her seatbelt. I mean, I'm sure there's probably someone figured out by now if she was wearing her seatbelt or not, but we don't know that. So maybe she wasn't wearing it, and that's how she wasn't restrained, and she maybe was like flown into the air. So who knows. But another thing, so obviously if this is the case, then this is like a conspiracy theory that everything's rigged. So I'm definitely not leaning towards that. But the other thing is that man, I don't know the substance of these red lines, but someone suggested that this is like the wine from the car or something, because in the car, as you know, there have been found like Coca-Cola bottles that like had the odor of alcohol, like really strong odor of alcohol. So, and also
Right.
I think the wine was opened up. I know that the wine box was in the back seat. I'm not 100% certain if the wine box was opened up. Like, all of these details are a little bit like shaky in this case. No one really wants to like bring them up in terms of like the police guys and stuff. So maybe it was like spilled wine or something. I don't know, man. So just a quick, note that there were like some interesting details in terms of the crash as well, like some unanswered questions. So yeah. Oh, I think I lost you, man.
Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, no, I was on mute.
perfect.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, there was a lot of oddness. It says the airbags deployed as well. So I don't know if she could have even hit her head if the airbag is.
Exactly.
I don't.
Right?
I don't know how much an airbag will what it will do when you don't have a seatbelt on, or if you don't. But you would think that she would have some kind of visible head injury or something if she cracked the windshield like that. So it's a little weird. Maybe.
Oh, that's a
Maybe it
great
was
point.
just-
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Then the bus driver would have noticed, if it was something like that.
She would be staggering around from a head injury or something, but she didn't really seem to be acting odd from what was described. And then, yeah, I mean, what was weird was at 7:46, and really not long at all after this,
Right.
The police officer from Haverhill arrives at the scene, and no one's in or around the car. The car had impacted the tree on the driver's side of the vehicle, severely damaging the left headlight, pushed the car's radiator into the fan, which is why it couldn't move anymore, so it couldn't drive away from the scene. Like I said, the windshield was cracked on the driver's side, but that could have just been from the force of the accident. And then, like I said, inside the car, there's red stains that look like red wine. There's an empty beer bottle. So that's kind of a red flag too, because really you're not in the U.S. They're really sensitive about about what's going on there. So about open containers of alcohol. So yeah, it really at this point, and maybe this is we're almost getting to a good point where we can cut off the episode and go into the second part.
Right.
But at this point, all we really have is we have an empty car with a bunch of stuff in it, and some interesting stuff as well, which maybe is worth covering more on our next section.
On the episode 2, that's gonna be coming out like a few days after this one. We're gonna be covering. We're gonna be looking into persons of interest. Now I found a list of people complied, and I would actually like to talk about those people. I think this case once again deserves a second part. So I guess we did a pretty okay job. I think in covering like the event itself, but the theories, our reactions, as well as the people of interest who are involved, which I'd probably go as far as to say even like the more interesting episode is probably going to be in the part 2. So guys, if you're watching this on Saturday, then this episode is probably coming out somewhere around Tuesday, or maybe Monday, I should say. We'll see how the schedule works out here for us. And yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed the first part of the Maura Murray case. We will catch you on the next on the second part. So once again, a double episode week for us this week. And guys, for now, stay safe and peace out.